gentilissimi ospiti, buon pomeriggio, ci apprestiamo a riprendere il nostro congresso, quindi vi invitiamo a occupare il vostro posto, grazie. E ci scusiamo anche per qualche minuto di ritardo dovuto a un piccolo problema tecnico che abbiamo risolto. Ben ritrovati dopo la parte conviviale del congresso e si avvia la terza parte della nostra giornata, oggi, che si suddividerà in due momenti principali. Avremo ancora un keynote speech che sarà poi seguito dal terzo ed ultimo panel. Per quanto riguarda il keynote speech, il nostro relatore è il professor Paolo Benanti, che dal 2008 è docente presso la Pontificia Università Gregoriana. I suoi studi, molto ampi, spaziano dall'etica delle tecnologie all'intelligenza artificiale fino al postumano. È membro della Pontificia Accademia per la Vita, con particolare mandato relativo al mondo delle intelligenze artificiali, e nel 2023 è stato nominato dal segretario generale delle Nazioni Unite fra i 38 esperti per formare l'High Level Advisory Board on Artificial Intelligence. Circa poi il contenuto del suo intervento, esso verterà sulle frontiere etiche della complessa relazione tra intelligenza artificiale e persona. Professore, a lei la parola e grazie per la sua presenza. Sì. L'intervento sarà in lingua inglese.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I am glad of this opportunity, and I will try to do my best as a professor of ethics. That means that I will take the privilege to make questions and run away before giving any kind of answers. The first core element is, what does it mean ethics, especially applied to a term like technology or artificial intelligence technology? To answer this question, I need to be back to one of my masters that was one of my professors during my PhD in the United States. The lecture that we get that day was on New York, boots on the field, and we was bring it to see not really special things in Manhattan, New York, but an highway. That highway is a multiple-lane highway that is used to connect New York City, Manhattan, to Long Island. And the professor, in a really provocative way, asked to us, what do you see? Can you imagine we was almost 10 PhD students, everyone would like to be the best man in the room. We tried to say everything. At the end of the day, the answer was concrete and asphalt. Then we was bring inside the public library when a multiple copies of a really famous book about the life of one of the biggest politicians in New York City, Robert Moses, was waiting for us. The book is a 1,000-page book, one of the best 100 non-fictional books in US market, and is the life of these politicians and the idea that shaped the city under his governance. One of the first things that we was able to achieve is that man has a real clear vision of society. Probably such kind of idea are not anymore acceptable, but at that time, the idea was that the best part of the city has to be kept for the best part of population. In his mind, the best part of population was the rich white middle class. And because in Long Island, there is one of the best natural spots near Manhattan, the idea was to allow only such kind of population to be there. And the solution was to build the concrete bridge on the highway 2 feet lower than the standard, 66 centimeters lower than the standard. There is no train, and only the people that can afford a car can go to the beach. At the end of the day, the lecture was, every technological artifact, once is deployed in a society, is a displacement of power and is a form of order. Ethics of technology is simple questioning technology in that direction to allow all the different stakeholders to make it visible which kind of displacement of power and form of order such kind of technology can produce in society. Well, probably today is not anymore the time to have such kind of effect with something like concrete and asphalt alone. But an algorithm behind a portal could simply define who can access and the one that cannot access. And so an ethical questioning of technology is questioning without giving any answer, but giving the visibility on such kind of effect. But ethics of technology is also something else. I'm used to give a 180-hour class on that, so I try to keep myself focused. But another of the most interesting example to understand what does it mean to have an ethical approach to technology is about California, where the tomato production that has a really key role in the urbanization of the United States was one of the major production. In the early 70s, there was 3,200 farmers. Then in 1975, the University of California simply produced a mechanical harvester, a huge, giant machine, big, also 1.5 of this room, that was able to pass over the line of tomatoes, pick the tomatoes, crunch the plant, box the tomatoes, and the price of harvesting tomato dropped to $2 per ton. It has also a huge influence on seasonal migration from Mexico, but this is another side. The problem is that early 80s, the number of farms dropped from 3,200 to 240. Why? Are we producing less tomatoes? Absolutely not. But the price of such kind of machine was $175,000 in 1970. That means almost $500,000 of today. Innovation produces a concentration of the market. And then now it's time for bias. I'm Italian. You know, to have such mechanical things that can harvest tomatoes in the 70s, when robotics is not so evolved, you have to select a really tough tomatoes that can resist to mechanical compression. For an Italian like me, the taste is not the same. And so also the nature of the product is changing. Try to think innovation on another section of the market, news market. Only the news producer that can afford the platform and the algorithm, they can survive. And only the news that are the best picked by the algorithm and driven to people are the news that are consumed in today's society. At least, but not at last, I would like to show you two pictures. On the left side, you have Samuel Insull. On the right side, you know, as a professor, I'm a little bit obsessive. You have a really rare document that came out from the first 5-year plan from Lenin that is called the Goel-Ro plan. When you have a technology, you can have one kind of technology that is a special purpose technology. We need to do something, we need to write, and we have the pen, we have the type machine, we have the computer, the laptop, the phone, the AI, and things so on. But there is a moment inside the innovation in which you develop such kind of things like a technology that is not used to do something, special purpose technology, but change the way in which we do everything, general purpose technology. When you inject or when you produce such kind of technology, there is no way to distribute it without an ideological view on the reality. Left side, Samuel Insull, what we can define the Western model. Lower the price, much more family can acquire it, and you distribute it. Let's democratize it. Right side, Goel-Ro plan is the plan to distribute electrical power. That is one of the general purpose technologies. Samuel Insull is for electricity with General Electric Company. Lenin plan, Goel-Ro plan, was to produce the Sovietization of the republics with electricity. Try to think about the discussion that we have today about the cloud, the two models, the Western and non-Western model. Well, if this is an example of questioning technology, how we should questioning AI technology? Well, the real thing is that AI is a technology that arises from the use of information for control. The first probably intelligent machine was such kind of mechanical mouse produced by Claude Shannon that thanks to an electrical impulse was able to change direction and find the exit from a labyrinth. So when we say information, we say a control system in the automatization that gives to the machine an unseen before ability. We talk a lot with Yundir about that, with autonomous weapon. You give an answer to the machine, and the machine finds the means to satisfy such kind of ends. And the real ethical problem is that an ends do not justify all the means. I think is the core element on any diplomatic treaty. And this is the main core problem on deploying AI, ethically speaking, on a society, is the main things that we have to discuss in a public way to have such kind of things like social justice. And the problem is the relationship between AI, between such kind of technology and the human beings. Because, you know, everything works with a model that is a cybernetic loop in which the information produces a changing of behavior with a feedback loop to the machine. The feedback loop was given by a sensor. But the best sensor that we can imagine for the machine is the human beings. So you can imagine our finger on a smartphone like the sensor that is controlling such kind of machine that is a smartphone. But I'm going fast because I have no time. There is a lot of philosophical literature that told us that if we put the human beings and the machine on the same level of information, this is Heidegger, that we have no sureness that is the man that is controlling the machine and it's not the machine that is controlling the man. So actually, when you see a young adult on the street, is it his finger that is controlling the smartphone, or are the notifications of the smartphone that are controlling the kids? Well, the double side, I'm thinking to the military use of AI, it's really important, especially in the lethal condition. And this is bring us to the Geneva condition, because we have to be much more than sure there is a human responsibility that decide or produce the effect from such kind of things, especially when the most valuable right, like the human rights, are at the stake. And so that brings us to the core element. And the core element is freedom. In which way we can stitch together AI systems that are made to control and be controlled, such kind of things like freedom, that is the core element of every modern democracy, and that we would like to keep safe. We have to recognize that like every general purpose technology, AI will be a middle layer in the execution of the process. Now I'm controlling the slide with these remotes, and electricity, the battery, is the middle layer between my pushing of the button and the execution of something there. But AI will be the next big thing. It's the everyday experience of some one of us when we talk with the digital assistant of our smartphone. We ask something in natural language, and I'm sure that a lot of time the digital assistant misunderstands you. With me, happen a lot of time, especially asking to call some name or someone. Well, this is a problem, because the execution of the process could be handled, mishandled, or not well bring to the end by such kind of system. So to keep the freedom of the execution of the process, we need some kind of ethical guardrail that ensure the trustability of the system once you deploy as a middle layer in the execution of the process. But if we go to the example of freedom, I cannot simply shout, I have to shout on another problem. It's too long to talk about this here, but from the same origin of cybernetics, the first slide, and the behavioral psychology of today, there is a connection of root and thinking, and the connection is about the idea of information and signaling. So I know that this is a really diplomatic environment, and maybe the discussion that I could produce is a little bit unpolite, but it's history, you know, it comes from the history. We discover this ability of controlling the behavior with information in the 90s in the Schiphol Airport, where the general manager of Schiphol Airport has a huge problem in cleaning male toilets. The cost of cleaning male toilets was simply the double that cleaning the female toilets. And you can imagine why. Well, a really classical normative approach, please keep clean, is not working. Well, it was enough to paint a little fly inside the restroom, inside the water closet, that the price of cleaning male toilet dropped to the price of the woman ones. This is a huge insight on main brain. But beside that, there is a psychological explanation that is about the natural tendency of the male to have an aim to an object from when we was in Neanderthal and when we was to hunt. But beside that, the idea is that what an explicit high-level normative indication was not able to do, an implicit information was able to produce a changing of behavior. Well, I think that if we see the last year and all the trouble that we have with the AI system and information in the public sphere in the age of election, this is a wonderful element and example on how freedom could be threatened by such kind of system. Try to think an AI interface between human beings and a weapon. Such kind of weapon with such kind of information can simply have a nudging effect on the use of the weapon in itself. And that, if we are talking of the Geneva Convention, we have to clarify. We have to be really clear and leave really clear where the human responsibility starts and ends, and where a tool is a tool and is not a producing of a behavior. And let me go fast, my time is running, to another of the topic. Should such kind of tools in some way influence, threaten, modify democracy? I'm going in the direction of geopolitical challenge. Well, everything started with the arise of computation. Computation put the roots old, but we have the first two computers during World War II. And thanks to computer, the Anglo-American army was able to defeat the fascist and Nazi forces. And two computer was really fundamental for that. One was Colossus, Bletchley Park, London, that was able to crack the German code that was used to close the communication with the army. And the other was ENIAC, United States, that was able to make the calculation, partial differential equation of von Neumann, connected to the realization of the nuke bomb. At that time, Watson, the CIO of IBM Computing, make a prediction on the future of computer that is still a huge teaching for people that, like me, are used to work with technology. Watson say, in all the global market, there will be a space just for 5 or 6 computers. And the teaching is, do not make prediction when you work with technology. But the introduction of a tool, that is the transistor, and the idea given by the US government to release the transistor free to use to all the company that send an engineer to make a 1-week class for $25,000 at Bell Labs, produced the distribution of computer in the 50s and in the 60s. At that time, the impact of computer was so strong that the organization changed their nature. One of the first companies that went to take the transistor was the Sony. I would like simply to highlight how geopolitical is computation. Don't forget that the Nippon Empire was defeated by the nuke bomb a few years before. Now, this transfer of technology, the cutting-edge technology, was the first sign of an alliance between the two countries. Well, the computer spread inside the society. In the 1980s, the biggest computer was in the Pentagon and was organizing all the US Army. The second one was in Kentucky in the main place of Walmart and was organizing all the scaffold in the United States. But at that point, culture came and knocked on computation. Probably you remember that during the 70s, there was the counterculture that arose from university. The first computer was a centralized computational power in a place called mainframe. But if you look at the counterculture of the 70s, everything that was centralized was seen as bad. And so the hippie from Silicon Valley start to attack a centralized computational power and give to us the personal computer. The cultural effect of such kind of tools was so deep that the Weekly Times, 1983, celebrating the man of 1982, simply said that the man of 1982 was not a man, but was a computer. The title was The Computer Movins. And so the personal computer start to change our society. The first desktop, I remember one of my grandfather, and then the laptop. We are the 70, the 80, the second one is from the 80. And then, again, the society knock on computational power. In the 90s, we have the collapse of Berlin Wall. And a politologist like Fukuyama wrote a famous book, The End of History, theorizing that there is just one victory system, liberal capitalism, and we can relax. It's a bad summary of a wonderful book. Well, at that time, we start to think that we can simply change the order of an equation that simply drive the Western development after World War II. The equation was liberal democracy plus free market is equal to an augmentation of the well-being of people. It's what happened to Italy, it's what happened to France, to Germany, to Portugal, and things like that. Well, at that time, Madeleine Albright, with Clinton, she was the Secretary of State, tried to think that they can change the order of the equation. And the idea was, if we give some of well-being and free market to another country, we can produce a democratization of the country. And that was behind the opening of the WTO to China. I was with Madeleine Albright in one of the last classes, and she used to say, we fail. They become richer, they don't change the political system. But this is a huge influence on the Western perception of ourselves. Why? Because we start to see that democracy is not so much attractive. If you can stay well and rich without democracy, well, democracy is not anymore a needing. But computational give us a solution. In the first decade of this century, we got the smartphone. When I'm used to make lecture here, or in Seattle, I told to my students, it's not the most personal, it's also the most intimate computational power. And the kids look at me with this face like I say, you are old. And I try to show them an experiment. Okay, if it's not intimate, unlock your phone and pass to the people to your right. If you can't, there is something that is really intimate. But this smartphone, at the end of the first decades of this century, was connected to the Arabic Spring. And we convince ourselves that being in the digital, connecting on the digital, will produce attraction to the democratic value and an attraction to democracy. 10 years later, 2021, the riots at Capitol Hill show us fake news, polarization, and things like that, and we start to imagine that such kind of tool could be the worst enemy of the democratic process. Well, but this is not the core element of my presentation. There is another core element. And the element that I would like to highlight to you was something that happened at the end of the second decades of this century, that is the pandemic. Okay, this is the Arabic Spring, and this is what happened after the January 2021. But with the pandemic, we have a clearly vision on what changed in a digital society. We was not anymore able to be together in an analogous way, lockdown, but we was able to surrogate such kind of things thanks to our personal computational power. Zoom meeting, digital signatures, we was able to move money with an app. So basically what we discovered is that in the last 10 years, 2012 up to 2020, the smartphone eaten the content of our pocket. Everything is in the smartphone. Last time that I went to the United Nations in New York, the Hilton Hotel don't give me a key for my room. It was enough my smartphone. So we digitize our analogous space. We have started to produce what we can call a computational democracy. A democracy that is highlighted and strengthened by digital power. At this point, start the third decades. And everyone was aware of artificial intelligence on January 2023 when ChatGPT was available for every one of us. And ChatGPT is the new challenge on that. Because with ChatGPT, with LLM, with digital tools, you don't have vision, it's blur the definition and the distance between which kind of process happen in your personal computational power and which kind will happen in a centralized computational power system that is called the cloud. But this time, this new centralization produces an absorption of all the process that we digitize. And here is the challenge of AI in the public democratic space. The way in which we'll play these 10 years will tell what remains of our public democratic process and what will be centralized and controlled by the owners of the cloud. Well, I would like to finish really fast in the last 7 minutes that remain to me about talking about peace. I told you as an advertise when I start, I leave the privilege to make questions and not to give any answer. Well, there is an element with artificial intelligence that is the huge amount and diffusion of open source model. An open source model is something, it's a large language model that can run on your personal device on premises without any connection to a centralized system. This is really interesting, you know. From the last September, if you buy a computer, a Windows 1 or an Apple 1, you will have infused in your system such kind of system of large language model, something work on-prem, something work on cloud with this blurring of distance and difference. There is a problem, and this magic number is 40 TOPS, trillion of operations per second, that give to the machine the ability to be AI infused. Well, one of the last news, this is last month, is that the last large language model, like Claude, can behave like a personal agent on your computer. So they simply transform your machine to an autonomous agent. Well, what can happen, and it's already happened, when you create an unrestricted AI agent, autonomous agent, with an LLM that is running on your computer. First of all, imagine that I take the control of the computer of someone of you. I'm not simply stealing the data. I can dialogue with such kind of computer and tell to the computer, give me all the things that I can use to blackmail the owners. Or give me all the secret file that you can find on it. Or all the classified things. Or produce such kind of content that then could be discovered or used as a sort of blackmail to the owners. Or try to think if someone can write mail from your computer in a diplomatic way or in a military way on things like that. But there is another threat, and the threat is this really new form of intelligence that we can develop with such kind of agent that we are not used to. It's a discussion that UNIDIR put in place, and is the swarm intelligence. We have such kind of meeting in Geneva when we go as a, you heard I'm part of this advisory board, and we meet with UNIDIR, and they show us that what we can call swarm intelligence is the new threat. Imagine that they use capture computer of people to have a swarm attack to a critical infrastructure of a nation. What the autonomous agent can do is simple to be able to react and adapt and adjust themselves to avoid any kind of lowering of the impact on critical infrastructure. Or I can have a really problematic things that is, for example, without swarm autonomous robot. We are used to be, and when I say we are used to be, means that when we was in the Paleolithic condition is the first understanding of that, to have this kind of idea of one individual, one intelligence. A swarm intelligence is a total alien form of intelligence that we are not used to surface. If we look at the report of United Nations, we know that the first death that we know for an autonomous weapon was an Haftar soldier in Libya for an autonomous loitering ammunition that simply was an unseen threat to a soldier. The ammunition jumped and produced an attack from the height. That is something that no one is trained to avoid. Well, this new kind of threat in the cyberspace and in the physical space could be the worst enemy of peace, and the wars threatened between nation relationship in the cyberspace. Well, theoretically, I can continue and continue in questioning technology, but for me it's important to highlight the ethics in the public sphere in this moment, especially with the perspective that here in the Pontificia Gregoriana University we are highlighting, is this idea of questioning technology to allow all the different stakeholders to questioning technology and to finding new way to defend human rights, peace, in a way that will be workable for this century. Thank you very much.
Ringraziamo davvero il professor Benanti di aver messo a disposizione di tutto l'uditorio la sua immensa competenza ed ora sono lieto di passare nuovamente la parola a Catarina Frei per l'ultimo panel della giornata. Il tema di questo panel è il seguente: quali sono le opportunità offerte dalle nuove tecnologie per migliorare la protezione dei civili in ambito umanitario. Anche per questo terzo panel la modalità è quella ormai consueta, ci verranno forniti alcuni input, dopodiché ci sarà un question time. Grazie di nuovo a lei e agli altri relatori per quanto condividerete con le nostre intelligenze e i nostri cuori.
Grazie. Prego. Così. Sì. Grazie tantissimo. And it is a privilege to be here again in the panel, and it was actually the panel I had agreed to moderate at the beginning, which is obviously in a way the easiest one because it tries to focus on the positive sides. And I'm also specifically happy that we have this as the third panel because hopefully that gives us the opportunity to leave with a not only heavy heart but also with some hope. Because I'm personally also very convinced that there's a lot of positive sides of AI. And I think that also somehow closes today, as Professor von Braun started, you remember that I think it was 7 points of applications that you mentioned, and you said that they have a dual use. And I think the first and the second panel focused specifically on somehow more challenging uses, and I will really try and hope my panelists help me with that we will now focus on the positive sides that also give some chances and opportunities of new technologies and AI in the humanitarian sector. We will do, again, the same as in the morning sessions. We will have more or less 10 minutes each of the panelists do some presentations and share of their expertise. Then we would go in a panel discussion on one or two of my questions, and then I would open again. So please feel free to note down your questions that you would like to ask. Distinguished panelists, I would like to start with Federica Dupasquier on the other hand. And again, please feel free to speak either in Italian or English, not in any of the many other languages that you speak. So I will start first again. Federica Dupasquier is a humanitarian, a lawyer, and a strategist. She is currently spearheading a new initiative at the intersection of science, technology, and the future of peace and war at the Geneva-based Anticipation Think and Do Tank Gesta on developing a project on revitalizing international law at Lex. She's also an international fellow at the Yale Center for Digital Ethics, where I think you're also preparing a course at the moment. Prior to this, and I think that makes it very interesting to have you on this panel, you have been for many, many years working also for the ICRC. You've had many, many postings in Ukraine, Ethiopia, Syria, and also in the occupied Palestinian territory, and also the legal outreach of ICRC in New York. And not only are you at Yale, if I'm not mistaken, at the moment, you also hold a degree of Harvard University and University of St. Gallen. So, Federica, you now are here on the panel for Gesta, so I would very much like to invite you on sharing a bit, probably describing very quickly on what Gesta is for the people who might not be so familiar with it, but then also share some views on how Jester sees really the anticipatory role and also and again with the positive view on the chances of new technology for the humanitarian work. Thank you.
Tante grazie Caterina, grazie anche alla Svizzera per l'invito a questa conferenza. Non è facile parlare dopo tante intervenzioni così interessanti e così informative. Come il dottore Persipaoli, anch'io per evitare la macedonia linguistica farò il mio intervento in inglese. Mi sa che sarà anche più facile per la discussione con gli altri panelisti, ma volevo ringraziare la Svizzera e salutare anche l'udienza. GESDA, the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, is a foundation based in Geneva that was actually created by the Swiss government and the Canton of Geneva with the ambition to anticipate the frontier of science and recognizing that we are today in a world that's increasingly accelerated and impacted by science. One of the key, let's say, products that GESDA creates every year is the Science Breakthrough Radar, where my colleagues and 2,000 scientists from, I think, 73 countries across the world, so it's really a very broad effort geographically, map, in a way, the frontier of emerging technologies. So how is eco-augmentation likely to evolve 5, 10, 25 years from now? And the same for roughly 40 other topics. The idea here is really to extrapolate from what is cooking in the labs today in these fields to think about, in a way, separate what is pure science fiction, what is already possible, and sometimes is very much hyped up in the media, and somewhere in the middle, what is the direction that science is taking. Now, the project that I head is basically taking this frontier of science and starting to think, what implications could this have for the future of peace and security? So recognizing that, in a way, of these 40 domains, some are likely to impact the work that all of us here are interested in around security, around peace, around humanitarian action more than others. In this year, what we did, and I should maybe just say that we're working very closely with the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Switzerland on this, and notably have contributed to Switzerland's seat at the Security Council this year, and congratulations to my colleagues here for passing a presidential statement recently, basically anchoring, which might seem quite basic, but it was actually not that easy to get through, anchoring within the Security Council and Security Council language the idea that developments in science and technology are actually relevant for peace and security, and that therefore, if you want to be a relevant actor in this domain in the coming years, you need to keep abreast and keep yourself informed of how these technologies are evolving. So what we've done, and so maybe one caveat is that GESDA is very much oriented towards the future. So I'm not going to speak so much about what are positive applications of AI in humanitarian action today. I think, Philippe, you'll be much better suited to do that, but rather to speak a little bit about the anticipatory view that GESDA takes on this. So we've identified 5 domains of science that we think will be most transformative and impactful in terms of peace and security. The first is artificial intelligence, then quantum, synthetic biology, neurotechnology, and outer space. And you have heard some of these domains mentioned earlier today already. We've heard a lot about how artificial intelligence is shaping conflicts today, both in terms of risks and in terms of opportunities. Perhaps I would add a few points on where, let's say, emerging trends where we see some potential. Today already, digital tools are being used to increase inclusion in peace processes. So in Libya, and this is already a few years ago, social media were very much used to be able to bring in voices that otherwise couldn't be sitting at the table. That's, again, more today and in the past. There's also a recent article, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago in Nature, about the uses of AI chatbots called the Habermas machine. Perhaps some of you have heard about this, basically to bring people with very different opinions closer together. So using, in a way, an AI chatbot as a way of starting to create common ground in very polarized society. This experiment was done in the US, which, as we all know, is an example of a pretty polarized society. And I think in the near future, there will be uses of AI tools to support mediation efforts. There is some research underway. As many of the panelists before us mentioned, what artificial intelligence helps you do is basically analyze and structure large amounts of data and extract, sort of actionable summaries, recommendations. And so in the same way that this is being used in many other domains, there is, I know, some research that's going on today looking at analyzing past peace practice, past peace negotiations, and looking at what we can learn from those today and what options we can generate on that basis for the challenges in conflicts that we're confronted with today. So that's, in a way, the situation today. Going forward, in terms of the AI horizon that the scientists that we work with sort of sketch out, and it's very difficult, to have a 10-year time horizon on AI developments. I mean, even 2 months from now, it's hard to be sure of what will come out. But what broadly defined scientists agree on is that current capabilities will continue to improve, that AI systems using data from a variety of source types will be possible, so multimodal AI, not just text, but also videos, images, so in a way operating with a lot more and different kinds of information, which might also improve the human-computer interaction, because humans are inherently multimodal. So these developments will also facilitate a better human-machine interactions. But so that's in a way on looking ahead at developments in AI. Where we think, though, that some of the greatest impact will come on warfare is not so much warfare and protection of civilians, and in a way, it's hard to really separate the positive outcomes from the negative ones. As we've heard today, there's really dual or multi-use of these technologies. But what we think will be a game changer is really this convergence of artificial intelligence with other domains of science. And you've heard a little bit about this before today. But I think that's really what's going to bring new breakthroughs and turbocharge both opportunities but also threats. So I'll just give you 3 examples of that and try and focus on the positive side, but to give you an idea. So if you think of the intersection of quantum technologies and artificial intelligence, 10 years from now, what experts tell us is that this will completely disrupt global cybersecurity. So both make existing encryption mechanisms completely useless, but also, of course, provide new encryption capabilities. But so it's going to radically redraw that map. And other quantum technologies, such as quantum sensing or quantum detection, they carry very important potential to save lives, either by detecting land and sea mines and being much more efficient in that, with obvious benefits for the prevention of harm to civilians, but also in identifying tiny amounts of chemical or biological agents with other very positive applications there. If we look at the intersection between AI and synthetic biology, that convergence will, as some speakers alluded to earlier, accelerate and expand the search, development, and deployment of new biological agents. So that will mean that, in a way, on the negative side, there will be more options for biological weapons, and including some that could target individuals or groups, which for now is not really possible, but also will, of course, enable the development of vaccines and treatments. And the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was alluded to earlier. I think that the positive impact there is immense, as we've seen, in terms of developing new medication, of fighting antibiotic resistance, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole very positive scope of application there. And then finally, thinking about the convergence of neurotechnology and AI, there again, it's a medal with two sides, a coin with two sides. On the positive side, developments in neurotechnology today are already allowing for are allowing for all sorts of treatments in terms of, for instance, Parkinson's disease. And what scientists tell us is that very probably it will be extremely helpful in terms of preventing and treating post-traumatic stress disorders and other disorders that are created by intense exposure to stress, with obvious beneficial impact for humanitarian actors, for people living in conflict zones, for soldiers as well in terms of their well-being. And it will, of course, also massively improve the lives of patients that have injuries that range from traumatic brain injury to amputation. So if you think of survivors of landmines who would have, again, access to neuroprosthetics, the developments in this field will massively improve their quality of life. And on the other hand, you have the possibility on the horizon now of really hybrid intelligence playing a role in decision-making. So we've heard earlier today already about decision-making by human beings that very much leans on artificial intelligence, with some questions about responsibility there. But in a way, the future, I think, will ask much more pressing questions of accountability and responsibility, insofar as it will be possible, technically, to, in a way, intertwine artificial and human intelligence to the point where it will be might be difficult to attribute who took a decision and where the responsibility lies in terms of the decision-taking. So that also, asks a few questions. So going back to your question about, and concluding here, about where GESDA sees, in a way, the potential of science anticipation for the protection of civilians. It's really in anticipating these developments and creating the space for a discussion. And I'm afraid I'm going to need to disagree with His Eminence Pauline, who said that technology is neutral. I think it's neither bad nor good, but it's certainly not neutral either. And we've heard from some of the interventions earlier today the impact that it has on society, on forms of organization, on cultures. And so what the philosophy behind the work that GESDA is doing is that in anticipating what will be possible technically, we're opening a space to have a conversation around the governance of these technologies and to feed agency and intention back into the social frame around these technologies.
Thank you so much. I'm hesitating to go into the discussion about whether or not it's neutral, but I leave that probably for the panel. Thank you so much for sharing some views and for really trying to focus on the positive use cases. I'm grateful for that. I would like to turn over to you, Nicola. Again, please feel free to do in Italian. I still do present you in English. Nicola Venturi, Dr. Nicola Venturi is from the Italian part of Switzerland. Obviously, he is since 2019 a scientific project manager at the Competence Center for AI and Simulation of the Swiss Federal Office for Defense Procurement, that's called ARMA Swiss. His current projects are focused on computer vision and reinforcement learning for security and defense applications. He holds a PhD in particular physics of University of Bern and a master in theoretical physics from ETH Zurich. And before you joined the ARMA Swiss, you've been working on several positions in CERN, working on statistical analysis of experimental data. Nicola, and again, as I asked also the Colonel, just share what you can, but obviously it would be very interesting to hear what your work includes also on the positive use cases, either in your work for ARMA Swiss, and where you would also see positive side effects or use cases for humanitarian actors or our colleagues that work in humanitarians. Please feel free.
Yes, I will speak also in English, just also many terminology of AI is in English, and I prefer to express myself in this language. Thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to participate to this panel and to give some input to the discussion. As you may have heard, my background is far away from what is legal and ethical. Nevertheless, I think it's extremely important, and a scientific point of view, ethical, political, and legal, all these aspects come together, and I think this panel is extremely helpful to try to have a common discussion and try to see the position of the other point of view. And only in this way we can really tackle the AI potential and problematic in a complete way. I'm a scientific project manager at ARMA Swiss, which is the technology center of the Federal Department of Defense, Civil Protection, and Sport. And our goal, as the name already says, is like to give technological support for the decision maker and for the department in general. Of course, we are mainly focused on the scientific side. Nevertheless, some of our colleagues work on ethical questions and legal questions, which are, of course, of big importance. Our goal is our focus is on all what is AI and simulation-based technology, what could be used, of course, with the caveat that this is a new technology and come with some risk, but it's also our task to understand this risk and make the people aware of all the risks that have been already mentioned, explainability, trainings data. There are a bunch of problematics that come with AI, so it's a tool, but it's not that it comes for free. There is a huge effort for training, for preparing data, and stuff like this. Talking about our work, I can mention what we do for civil protection and for our department in general. We have a simulation lab, and our partner of the defense and civil protection can develop and experiment solutions to actual or future problematic or challenges in a fully synthetic environment. So our goal is to take their needs and try to develop with technological tool, with AI and simulation, we combine very much because AI is an excellent tool for analyzing a huge amount of data, for discovering patterns that maybe with other classical tool like a statistical tool would be difficult to discover. And our main drive is to show what happens if. So we have a problematic and we try to enable an answer to this question with the help of simulation and AI. So again, it was mentioned, especially in civil protection, that one of the hot topics is that warfare is often conducted in urban environment. And one of our projects that we are about to start is to try to introduce in the simulation also the civilian layer. So we are trying to put into account all what is the civilian layer. How are the habits of the people living the city, and then how they react in case of catastrophe or attack or shortage of electricity or whatsoever problem may happen in a very dense and rapid changing environment. So the synthetic population is basically is composed by all socio-demographic and environmental data that, of course, are fictitious or anonymous due to the privacy application of the privacy policy, but which are representative of the real population. So, and then by doing the simulation, we can, of course, tackle certain problematic in the security and civil protection just by really making the people aware of this civilian layer. So what will be the consequence of a natural disaster, of a cyber attack on the power plant? 1 million of people is without water, what's happened? Or there is an explosion, people are escaping, which route, or collateral damage, what's happened to the city, and especially how the people react. And this is a key element for the civilian protection, to try to foresee the collective behavior of people in city. And this, we think, it's an holistic approach that can for sure help our civil protection and defense expert in training, adapting, and also be aware of what could be a real scenario. And then, of course, there are several AI algorithms and technology that can put in place to try to mimic the population. You can assign certain behavior. You can. There is really a lot of possibility, and depending on the needs, we can tune the simulation to better really to have a realistic environment. I mean, simulated, but in a way realistic, for anticipating also what is important, the consequences, because there is harm which happened, but there is also to take care also the after. We have no water for 1 day to a big city. This is a problem. But how we can tackle this problem? How can we reach also the people in the case of attack, or if there are some enemies or some mines or whatsoever in the city? So this is basically what we see as good use, or like interesting use of AI. And then again, we can analyze this huge amount of data of many simulations with AI algorithms, which allow us to do really a lot of scenario. Then, of course, it was mentioned pandemics. We also leverage AI during pandemics. We try to model where will be the next peak of bed occupation and intensive unit care and stuff like this, because of course there was the need for the army to support the hospital or to relieve part of the medical service by a certain task, and this was also an example where AI could help to predict a sort of predictivity power of AI. And then we have also, of course, it was mentioned in the fields of computer vision. That means We know that the so-called narrow AI is very good at sensing, like recognizing object or pattern in data or in image, and we could envision also to apply this to detect mines or unexploded ordnance that could then endanger the civilian. This, of course, need a lot of data because the AI algorithm learn from the data they were exposed to. So if there is no data, the algorithm has no mean to reasoning, because sensing doesn't mean reasoning. So if the algorithm has never seen a red mines, probably he will not recognize, or the shape is different. This algorithm will have some trouble to detect it. So also in this case, since it was mentioned before, maybe 80% of our work is really preparing data. Preparing data so that the algorithm can really learn in a proper way. Preparing means in a general way. It's not only the quantity of data, but it's the quality. We need to foresee all the possible cases. If like lighting condition, if it's dusk, if it's sun, if there are some reflection. I mean, or if the mine is on the grass, it's on the asphalt. There are all things that we need to take care to make our algorithm robust and try to minimize the error, or let's say the error that the algorithm is not doing. And yeah, these are basically some of the way that we think we can really use AI for the goods, for help our department in tackle actual challenge and future challenge. Just maybe if I have other 2 minutes, as it was mentioned by Federica, we have also a group which does technology foresight, and this is really very important for us because the first thing that we need to address is what will come in the future, what will be the trend, what will be the risk, so that we have enough time to understand, to study this new threat or new technology, and to gain a certain familiarity to be able to advise our department on the threat, on the opportunity, on the risk, and all what's come with the new technology, on the uncertainty.
Thank you, Nicola, so much. And I feel tempted to go into the discussion about does the AI need the data to train itself or not, because it was a discussion we had during the lunchtime. But we might save that for the panel. But I think it's a fantastic use cases that you mentioned that actually kind of forced me to hand over to the third panelist, because I think it was very understandable how you described specifically the use also to see the patterns, how the civilians would react in sort of an emergency, which I can imagine is also of interest for actors such as the ICRC. Thank you so much, Philip, also for having accepted to come here and to be on a panel with me. As I think you said it last night, that you're kind of my alter ego in the ICRC. Philip is a tech diplomat at the ICRC as well, a senior tech diplomacy delegate at the ICRC. So this is really, his work is in the intersection between governments, the academia, humanitarian, and the private sector, with the objective to better protect people affected by armed conflicts from the impact of cyber warfare, digital surveillance, online hate speech, or autonomous weapon systems, but also many of the other sections. You're passionate with making these issues more concrete. Philip is also the brain behind the fantastic exposition of the ICRC that's called The Digital Dilemmas, an immersive experience, and co-produced, and he also co-produced an free online course called Humanitarian Action in the Digital Space. And Philippe also co-created the Deepfake and You installation that Switzerland produced during the second presidency of the UN Security Council. I don't know if that's online as well, but I think it's unfortunately not, but it's worth having a look into it. You have a long experience at the ICRC as a delegate yourself with various posting. And I would very much like you to, maybe based on what we've heard before, also share with us again more with the positive, hopefully, use cases that you see for the ICRC and other humanitarian actors from AI and new technology applications. Also, maybe you already have your own, or maybe you can also elaborate on where you would see a need to better collaborate. Philippe.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you very much to Switzerland and the university for the invitation. Very happy to be here. And I'm very happy because I come to Rome to learn that Arma Suisse is doing something that we do also, of identifying unexploded remnants of war and landmines, something we do with Waseda University in Japan. So let's discuss after the... Because one of the conditions that you mentioned, this is something which is one of the biggest barrier to try to use AI is the quality, the level, or the number of data where we work. So one of the challenges we have at the ICRC is how we can use it with being true to who we are. And the who we are related to the many elements that constitute a humanitarian organization. First, the fact that we should not do things that my colleague Julie won't be happy about, that losing the human control and, let's say, have automated cash distribution. I'm making it up, we are not doing it. But whereas we keep saying we have the human in control when it's the use of autonomous weapons, and the left hand does the opposite. So there is a necessity to do that. As I mentioned, the quality and the type of data, in some places there is maybe one or two sources of data, or the data is only handwriting. There are quite many obstacles in the environment where we work, and I think this is one of the limits that we see in the way we can use AI in a meaningful way. And last but not least, I think the fact that we hear a lot a hype, quite important marketing campaigns from the tech companies. I could see that Claude was making advertisement on Times Square in New York, so I can imagine the amount of money they have. But we can hear about speeding processes, making life simpler, boost economic growth, whereas we work at striving to protect people, often the most vulnerable ones, those who have lost their life, or the family have lost their life, their homes, their harvest. And these people are not clients. And this is something where I face quite a lot when we speak with tech companies coming to us and promise us that they will help to solve some of the most pressing humanitarian challenges. They are not clients. They are not a market. And I think this is also putting some pressure on us. There is also a key element is how do we put the different elements together? And to answer, I would say the one question which is only related to AI, but to many other digital technologies, which is how we can use it without compromising our values, our principles, and our modus operandi. So at the ICRC, we gathered quite many people around the table from the field, from headquarters, from different disciplines. So we had legal people, we had policy, operations, ICT colleagues, and I think this was an interesting clash, maybe like, you know, when you try to put many atoms together. And this resulted in an internal AI policy. We are going to make it public in 2-3 weeks, so you have an avant-premiere. I'm going to give you some glimpse, but watch, well, I don't know how we can get in touch, but in case you're interested, there is something that we will go public. And we wanted to look on how, as I said, to find this right balance between the harvesting the positive elements without compromising who we are. So first, the main element is we want to be problem-driven. It sounds a bit trivial, but again, the fear of missing out that many people have of we should invest in AI because it will help us to do better. It's like, okay, what type of problems do we need to solve? Is AI one of the solutions or is it the solution? First, let's pause and take a breath and look at what can be done. Then also how we can use a very old tool that was adopted by the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement some 60 years ago, the so-called fundamental principles. And here I will focus only on the Humanitarian ones, which is humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. In our daily operations, they are kind of a compass. They guide us. They provide us an ethical and operational framework. And I think what is interesting is, though, as I said, they were adopted 60 years ago, they are still very relevant when we look at digital technologies. Allow me to give three of examples related to that. So the first one is humanity. I think many colleagues before have mentioned that. But for us, there is a requirement related to humanity is doing no harm, or I would say no digital harm. One of the biggest fear we have is that we try to help, and we create more damages than we provide good. So this is something when we look at digital technologies, when we don't have all the elements in hand, when the question of explainability that was mentioned before, or when we can't predict really much how the machine works, this is something where we are pretty cautious in deploying. So an element that we want to be sure is that if we deploy something, we want to be sure that this is really robust. There is another dimension related to that, which hasn't been mentioned here, or maybe I didn't hear it loudly, but is how AI, given the fact that the power is in very few hands around this technology, relates to tracking, surveillance, and monitoring. And again, having tools that are off the shelf, that are coming from companies with different agenda than ours, this is something we're a bit worried. Another principle is impartiality. We have been mentioning the question of bias and the problem that some of these tools have been developed in the West, where it's not exactly where we work. So I'm not going to go too much in details, but this is something where we want to be sure that when we deploy a tool or we use a tool, that the data sets, the model has been developed also on elements that we master, and we avoid racism, gender discrimination, etc. The last one I want to mention is neutrality, and this goes back to the question of who is behind the tool. And I think for us, I don't need to specify too much, but the fact that neutrality is a tool to achieve a mean, so how we can have access to places, having a tool that suddenly has behind it an economic or political agenda because the providers or the people want to gain markets, or that they come with that geopolitical dimension that AI has. This is something where we have an issue. And here I agree with you, Federica, technology is not neutral, to us at least, and we can feel it quite a lot because we are present all around the world. We are present in some 100 countries, and we are working with different government, non-state actors, some 450, which includes the new non-state actors, which are hackers, for example. Other elements we want to factor in, and this is a bit more detail in the strategy, in the policy that you will have online, the question of precaution. We don't want to test on people, so that's why we have some sandboxes. One of them is in Luxembourg, to do and test the tools so that we are sure that when we deploy it, it's robust. Safety, I mentioned the question of data protection, and here we have quite a strong data protection rules. So we want to be sure that if we use a tool, we have also some minimization of the data that we are using, especially when they are concerning people who are affected. Transparency, and this is something which is quite important. If we use it, we have to be quite transparent in the fact that we are using AI. I know sometimes it might be taboo because people are very worried or concerned, or on the contrary, it looks strange that we use AI. But if and when we use AI, we have to be very transparent about it. The explainability, I don't need to go to that. But the last part, which I heard also a little bit before, and that's the chance or the curse of being the last speaker. I can bounce back on some of what colleagues said before, is the notion of accountability. The accountability towards the affected population. And when I speak about that, is how we can involve them in the design of some of the tool. And this is becoming much more complex because we need to explain something that sometimes we don't understand ourselves. So this is also a first limit to say, well, if we can't explain it ourselves, how are we going to explain to someone in South Sudan, for example? Now, we are not totally technology adverse. We want to explore, and that's where we are very lucky to have some agreements with leading academic institutions. I mentioned Waseda in Japan, but we have also a few other Humanitarian chapters of academic institutions, such as the 2 Swiss Institute of Technology, but also Yale, etc. I give you a few examples of the things we are exploring, because we are still at the stage where we explore, and we might deploy it, but it's not yet mature enough. The first one is we are investigating the potential of machine learning to improve how we can forecast the medical supply and its delivery to health facilities in war zone. Here, sorry to use again South Sudan, but that's a context we are using often as the ultimate crash test, if I can use this word, is how we can deploy as efficiently as possible drugs that need to be kept in the cold chain. And AI is helping us to modelize this and to be a little bit more efficient, cost, etc. It's not yet ready, but this is a very promising technology. Together with the Swiss Institute of Technology, PFL in Lausanne, and Yale University, we are studying on creating a principled framework with which to design, evaluate, and deploy large language models in 2 areas. One is with Switzerland and the ICANN initiative that was mentioned before by Nina, where we want to create a model of a kind of a chatbot for IHL. It's an internal one. I'm sorry if you were excited about the fact that we will deploy it, but for the time being, we want to be sure that from A to Z, we control the whole chain and that we can use it on our own confidential internal data. So we are creating the model, we are working with the 2 institutions, and once we are quite happy about the way it works on public data, we'll take it internally and we use it. This will help some of the legal colleagues. Imagine a use case. We want to have a quite quick answer on what was the position of these armed groups or that country around prisoners of war. Now it takes maybe days, if not weeks, to get all the literature together. We hope to speed up so that our intervention, our protection intervention could be faster. We won't go public because then it will become ICRC's interpretation of IHL, and I'm not sure we would love to have someone says, we could kill these people because the ICRC said it's legal to kill them. So, but we don't know. The model itself will be on open source, and this is something maybe if people want to build or organizations want to build something different for a different purpose based on that model, I'm sure this will be available. The other one is a medical chatbot for for first responders, which takes into account diseases that are very rare, that are often based in places where there is little literature, but also taking into account the fact that tools, drugs, or solutions are not available. So it's making the medical chatbot a little bit of a higher standard. Last example is the mapping of vulnerable populations using AI to digest satellite imagery, building classification, connectivity data, social media presence, etc. So for example, we know that in some places where we work, there is maps, but they are flat. And sometimes we don't know if this building is a school or if it's really a building or something like that, which allows us to better understand. There was a publication in Nature about that. And this is also a promising technology. It wasn't, unfortunately, it's quite expensive because we need to buy image satellite, and it's sometimes a little bit expensive, as you know. And the last example I wanted to give is drones and landmines, but you already spoke about it. And yeah, that's it on my side. I think I'm very, very happy to hear that there is kind of a community of vivid thinkers, because again, alone we can't solve these issues, and having different views, having different perspectives is quite critical, at least for the ICRC, to try to find solutions. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Philip, so much for sharing also so many concrete use cases. I think that's very helpful, I assume also for the audience, but at least for me, to get a really understanding on what could be, what's like the chances, what's the good sides. Before I open the floor to other questions, I think this morning we've heard several times the word swarm intelligence. There was also this, for me, quite disturbing image, I think, that Monsieur Ricli showed about the swarm drones, if I'm mistaken. And I'm wondering if we use it in a sense of kind of swarm intelligence of a group, that you mentioned that you're sometimes working on similar projects that you just found out now, and I think there's no one from the private sector here, but I'm wondering what your thoughts on where there would be a role for like swarm intelligence in a sense of working together in like strengthening and like scaling these positive use cases that you were describing. How could we also include the private sector that is leading in a way also the technological developments? Also having in mind, by the way, that the foundation of the ICRC, right, that was initially founded by a businessman or originated by a Genevan businessman. So do you have any thoughts on that, how we could kind of strengthen this positive use by collaborating or strengthening forces?
Maybe I'll start, because it's easier to speak first then. But just to maybe first underline the importance of that. Someone recently told me that in the past decade in the US, I don't know what the figure is globally, but investment in innovation went from a ratio, public-private investment in innovation went from a ratio of 1 to 1. So 10 years ago in the US, for every dollar that was invested by the private sector in innovation, there was a dollar invested by the government in innovation. That ratio has now changed to 1 to 3. So for every dollar invested by the government, there are $3 invested by the private sector. So it's just to say that there is an immense involvement of the private sector in really defining the technologies that are shaping our societies. So at JESDA, a key tenet, a key idea at the basis of the creation of this organization is you need, to discuss governance, to think about how to shape the technology of the future, you need not only to have scientists and diplomats, people working in governance, but also to involve the private sector and think through and civil society at large. Now the how, I think that's a really good question. I'm personally obsessed with incentives. So My question is today, what incentives does the private sector have to actually come to the table and participate in these conversations in good faith? And because, as you mentioned, I studied law, I, of course, go to think about binding regulations that create a framework within which they need to operate. But there are other more bottom-up initiatives. 10 years ago, there was the whole business and human rights effort that was led by the UN and John Ruggie. So I think there are various, both in a way, soft law and hard law components that come into play here. And often, or for a long time also, an appetite, I think, by the private sector to be able to have a framework. And now maybe there's a level of hypocrisy in that appetite, because no framework also means you get to decide, what you do and what you invest in, as opposed to pay lip service to. But I do think there's also, in my experience at least, a real interest in having clarity on the rules of the game, which hasn't always been the case.
Thank you. Would you like to have a view on it, or would you prefer to open? Philippe?
No, I don't want to open, but just quickly, for the time being, we try to explain to the private sector the fact that if they manage to solve a case which is based on low resources with all the safeguards or the constraint we have, it's an excellent business case. Now we haven't managed to get to the point that people responded really positively. So I think there is a necessity to have a space for real dialogue and not a space where I have the impression that companies are trying to sell us something that already exists. Mm. It's more likely the startup environment in which there are some ideas and some solutions. And again, here, the two Swiss Institute of Technologies are excellent ecosystem in which we can come with potential solutions, but the big corporations, I haven't seen yet something very tangible.
Thank you. Do you want?
Yeah,
okay.
I think collaborative drone can expand just what one single drone does. So I can imagine they can scan much farther, or searching for people, or I can imagine maybe there is an earthquake, they can really very fast scan a huge area, taking picture, recognizing where there are maybe people trapped in, and spotting there and say, here there is someone that needs help, that is under the stones and whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine in this sense, so speeding up and collaborative tools. So one drone say, okay, I detect and communicate with the other say, okay, there is a person, I bring some water, whatsoever. It could be something like this, like
a whole team.
A sort of team, yeah. I don't know if it's technically possible, but I think this could be, in principle, going there where could be difficult for the people due to, I don't know, radiation, earthquake, or stuff like this, and do it quickly. There are some circumstances in which one day is maybe too much, or hours counts. And I think this could be a field of, a window of opportunities.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Pavel Petrik. I'm based here in Rome as the only journalist from Czechoslovakia. And my question, there are two parts of this question. The first is, the panel is called AI for Civil Society Protection, but there are countries in the world who develop AI or general digital skills, innovations, technologies against civil protection, against people, against freedom, and so on and so forth. So could you touch upon that? And that deals directly with my second question, which is in a way the question. And this is not the the neutrality thing. I didn't understand what you mean. You said there's no neutral, and you in this was in this accord with Cardinal Parolin, because you say AI is not neutral because they can be bad, or I didn't get it. You mentioned something like hackers, but there are also good hackers who try to hack the system to find the bugs and to be able to basically problem solve it. And one example is for Catholic doctrine, the pill after contraception is a technology which is bad, negative in itself. It cannot be good, cannot be neutral. Weapon, for instance, can be used also to protection. So I would say this is the example which I'll expect it from you to give so that I can understand what you mean by this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As I said, we're collecting questions. Just as to say, the focus of this panel was on the positive use of AI, because the other questions have been dealt in the previous panel. So it's more a chronological question of how we structured the day. Please, Professor von Braun.
Yeah. My question is mainly to Philippe Stoll, but maybe others can also comment on it. And it's about data limitations. Data limitations, you mentioned that. I think we have a rather mixed picture there, that in specific domains, say my field, agriculture, land use, field robotics, satellite interfaces, pixeling all fields of the American Midwest, property rights protect these data. So limited access to data that exist. The same applies, for instance, to data sets in the health sector, cancer statistics, openness in the US and in Estonia, in the rest of Europe, say in Germany, limited. So to what extent are regulations the problem and not the very existence of data? And secondly, to what extent are these large commercial data centers hoarding data, and it becomes very expensive also for civil society protection tasks to really get access to these data? And is this not a regulatory issue for AI? Also in the humanitarian field.
Thank you so much. Very interesting question. I think you, Ambasciatore, you were afterwards. Yes, please.
Thank you for giving me the floor again. Again, Diego Brasioli from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but my comment and observation is rather on a personal one for a special interest. I'm cultivating myself together with some colleagues about artificial intelligence and its impact on society. I found this segment very, very interesting because it tackles the issue of community engagement. How do you engage community? When we talk about civil society, we talk about a wide mosaic of interest, people, different sectors of society. Now, this kind of seminars is you see the participation of people with ties from the government, from the academia, sometimes from the private sector, which is crucial. We see a little bit less of civil society, so thank you for addressing this. My question is, how do you make sure that AI tools are developed not only in a technologically robust way, but also from a culturally robust way? Let me try to explain. How do you take into consideration the actual needs of some segments of diverse populations, especially the marginalized ones? How do you make sure that different AI systems are can interoperate in order to take advantage for all, because one size does not fit all in this kind of, when we talk about these people. How do you address marginalized sectors of society? Just one example for a specific field of research that I'm developing with some colleagues and friends of mine, indigenous people. Indigenous people amount to 7% of the world population. Indigenous people, we have very few of indigenous people in Europe. They're mostly in Latin America and Asia and Africa, mostly Latin America. But they are 77% of the world population. They are 18% of the population in poor living conditions in the world. So almost 20% of the poor people in the world are indigenous people. They live in places which are extremely rich in natural resources, very important for the development of new technologies, take rare earth elements and so on. They have thousands of years of cultural knowledge, which is not written because their tradition is oral. So how do you transfer this richness into a system that is based on data? How to make sure that they are not marginalized and actually they are taken into consideration into this kind of development. This is something, I'm not pretending an answer, but this is something we should take into consideration because, again, one size does not fit all, and AI can give enormous opportunities. Let me just refer to a World Economic Forum document about the positive impact of artificial intelligence and quantum technologies in sustaining the development goals worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it was one last question, and then I would, like to hand over to questions. So please, a short question if you don't mind.
Yes, short question. Lieutenant Colonel Laurence Boyard, Swiss Defense Attaché in Italy. This morning we have heard that AI is not able to distinguish who is participating or taking part to the combat. And I would like just to understand if you agree with that, if there is still something, tools being able to identify who is in fact a target or not a target, and what is maybe the limit of the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like, I think two of the questions are more focused on data availability in the larger scale. One question was about the neutrality trap. So and then I think one was more kind of question. I think it was more presented, at least that's how I understood it this morning, more presented as a challenge of AI, this question of distinction. So I would probably start there, if you don't mind, to elaborate on the neutrality question, and then hand over to Philippe on the data, and then, if you don't mind, to answer the last question.
Yeah, with pleasure. What I meant when I said that I don't believe technology is neutral is actually very similar to something Paolo Benanti mentioned, which is that technology changes basically dynamics and access to power. And so it's not that a technology is always good or it's always bad, but it's also wrong to pretend that it doesn't fundamentally change the way that we operate socially. And Mr. Benanti gave a number of examples of that. So that's basically what I meant. You don't get it? Okay, well, we can talk more later. Happy to.
And I'll add another element. When we have tech companies that are applying sanctions against a country where we work, this becomes an issue of neutrality. How can we operate something that suddenly is becoming a political tool as an organization who doesn't want to be dragged into politics? So this is that element also where, from an image perspective, the fact that I use this phone or that computer suddenly has a political dimension because these companies are becoming political. And if you want, I can carry on the discussion, though I have to take a train. But Ambassador, I fully agree with you. I came through the community engagement and accountability lens and that's how I landed with technologies, because we were thinking that technology would allow us to have a better dialogue, connections with affected communities in remote places. We realized that it doesn't help much often, and indeed, that's when we speak about data limitation, some of the fact that in places there is only 1 or 2 sources of data. Let's take the example of Afghanistan right now. Who is producing data? Who is producing information? The government and several, very few organizations. You might an organization on the spot. Is it robust data? I'm not sure. And you mentioned that dimension, which I really like. A lot of knowledge, human knowledge, is not on the internet. It's oral, it's sometimes handwriting, bad one, like mine. So I'm not sure this is really representative of the whole humanity. And when we hear the tech sector saying that they will solve humanity problems, which part of humanity they will help to solve problems? And again, this is for me a question of neutrality or power balance that we go to. So definitely agreeing with you. And right now, when we speak about, depending what type of AI we are speaking, but if we look at large language models, English works pretty okay. We did a test recently at the UN with images. There is still a lot of hallucination. I had a software which is quite sophisticated, producing 3 images by seconds of me, transform into a kind of Archimboldo painting. For those who don't know Archimboldo, he was painting people with vegetables. I keep hearing like 5, 6, 7, or 3 fingers. So, you know, still the problem of hallucination, doesn't understand everything. So images is also already a problem, but French, other languages, forget about it. So these are the things where we come to a narrow understanding of humanity. The question of
limitation. The question was whether regulation somehow also limits the data availability, which I found very interesting. Do you have a view on that?
I rather have regulation that explains how and what are the type of data that we are allowed to get, where do we draw the line of privacy, rather than having something that opens totally the flow. I'm not sure my data, I want my data to be part of something that I don't control, but that's maybe personal. But yes, indeed. And quickly to answer the question of the Swiss defense attaché on direct participation to hostilities, it's exactly that. I know now that some people in some countries, I'm not naming them, but are learning to find gesture that in case a drone is facing them, how to raise the hand, so potentially the camera recognizes someone surrendering. I don't know if this is already an answer, but that's what Nina mentioned, that I've developed a small installation that exists online called Digital Dilemmas. You have a small chapter on AI and tools, and that's exactly one of the elements. So far, there is no demonstration, there is no transparency from the different tech provider about how the software functions, and this is somehow an issue because there is no explainability, and therefore I don't know how you can rely on something that is not explained.
Well, no, I just thought that actually would be a very interesting follow-up panel. I'm looking to Manuela maybe for next year to organize, to see how there could be some of exchange, right, or inclusion of humanitarian actors, because you could train civilian population on how to show that you surrender. But I would also like to give you the floor, maybe to obviously to answer the question of the defense attaché, or also feel free to answer some of the other questions on data availability or restrictions.
I can mention maybe the data, because it's really, it was mentioned this morning that without data it's like an empty weapon, and this is really true. It's really true. And there are cases in which we need to be creative and try to have data for a field in which there is data scarcity, or happening that are so rare, like a catastrophe or war is a war in urban environment and so on. So we need to collect this data and keep in mind that AI can help us to solve specific problems. So we need to first understand which is the problem, what we want to solve. And this is the first question. And then, is there data? Is there enough data to have a robust system? An example of dual use that I can maybe mention are the deepfake. Deepfake are based on general adversarial network, and basically there are two net. One try to create a fake, and the other one try to detect the fake. In this way, we arrive to have really realistic picture, because the other net cannot recognize that is a fake. And we also saw, and this is a big concern in terms of spreading of misinformation, disinformation. But now, if we flip the technology, we can say, okay, I can create a set of images that are realistic. So, and then our goal is, okay, let's try to create an image of minds that are so real that we can really, or so realistic that we can really overcome this data scarcity, because these data are synthetic but are so good that fool the humans, because they cannot really distinguish, but they can be used to have a really good data set. And this is something, again, that came with AI. Of course, deepfake is bad, but there is possibility to really overcome data scarcity. And this is maybe an example that can bring some mitigation in data scarcity. Another problem, and synthetic data have much less concern with copyright infringement. They are not so expensive like satellite image. They are really expensive. You need a huge amount. And the other thing is that you are really creating your data set, so you have the control of data set, because Poisson data set with image which are not so good labeled have a huge impact on the performance of the net. So the control on the data is really a key element. This I wanted to say maybe. And the other question was for...
I think it was answered, no?
The thing of the, if we can distinguish, I can maybe say that depends, because these net are exposed to some data and they recognize some pattern. If the pattern is not there, so if I am a soldier and the net is trained to have to recognize people with a rifle, and I throw my rifle and I raise the hand, could be that I'm not detected as a combatant. And the other way can be that maybe one civilian do some move that trigger this algorithm. So it's really very difficult to, especially when it comes not to objects like minds, which are there, are fixed, but with humans that move, that have different, that's really difficult for my perspective. So it's like a difficult task.
See, we didn't manage to end on the positive side.
No.
I do agree. No, and I think that was discussed also this morning as a challenge.
It's a challenge, yeah.
Exactly. I would like to close, and obviously I think that the reflection you shared on synthetic data would open yet another debate about whether they would include the indigenous data that has in no way could have been included in even the creation of deepfakes. But I think, again, that might be a discussion for the after coffee break that I would be interested in as well. I hope we managed to also leave the audience with some, I find very inspiring use cases of where all of your organization are already working on a positive application of the technology. And I would like to thank you again for having come to Rome and for having shared your experiences and your views with the audience, both in here and also the ones online. And I would like to close this panel, to thank you for the attention, and to hand over to Ambassador Leimgruber again. Thank you.
Allora, alla cena di ieri sera con gli esperti, il professor von Braun ha chiesto con un sorriso se l'intelligenza artificiale sarà mai in grado di vincere il premio Nobel per la pace. È impossibile riassumere tutti gli entusiasmanti e complessi input di oggi. Vorrei quindi limitarmi a condividere con voi alcuni messaggi chiavi della giornata, nonché alcune delle molte domande emerse. L'intelligenza artificiale serve sia per scopi militari che per scopi civili, ha quindi un doppio uso, dual use. In situazioni di conflitti, l'IA viene già utilizzato, ad esempio, per identificare gli obiettivi o nel processo decisionale. Ma quanto sono affidabili i sistemi di intelligenza artificiale? Quanto sono affidabili le basi decisionali? In questo caso, ad esempio, viene in mente la parola chiave bias, parzialità delle fonti. L'intelligenza artificiale è una sfida importante per il diritto internazionale umanitario, soprattutto per quanto riguarda i sistemi di armi autonome. Come si fa a garantire il rispetto della proporzionalità e quindi la protezione dei civili? Oppure come si può garantire che i combattenti e non combattenti possono essere distinti? È essenziale tenere in considerazione il diritto internazionale umanitario durante lo sviluppo dell'intelligenza artificiale. È anche essenziale che la responsabilità decisionale non venga affidata alle macchine e, dal punto di vista della responsabilità legale, che una supervisione sia sempre garantita. Oggi si è discusso anche della volontà politica o strategico-militare, spesso assente, di limitare lo sviluppo e l'utilizzo dell'intelligenza artificiale per poterne valutare le conseguenze. Questo perché si tema uno svantaggio strategico. Abbiamo ritenuto importante concludere la conferenza con una nota positiva. È incoraggiante sentire che, oltre a tutti i rischi, l'intelligenza artificiale offre anche nuove opportunità per proteggere al meglio la popolazione civile in situazioni di conflitto. Come sottolineato da numerosi oratori, lo sviluppo dell'intelligenza artificiale e beneficio dell'umanità richiede un approccio interdisciplinare. Ciò tenere conto degli aspetti etici, umanitari, scientifici, religiosi, strategici, militari, politici e legali. È inoltre necessario un approccio che coinvolga diversi attori, multi-stakeholder approach. Possiamo soltanto sperare che le nuove possibilità dell'intelligenza artificiale superino i rischi e chissà, un giorno magari, l'intelligenza artificiale sarà candidata al premio Nobel. Per concludere vorrei ringraziare tutti gli esperti per le loro innumerevoli idee stimolanti, Don Andrea e Don Stefano per la loro moderazione, l'Università Gregoriana, in particolare il decano della Facoltà di Filosofia, professor Piccolo, lo staff dell'Ufficio Eventi, il dottor Pecoraro, Un ringraziamento anche ai traduttori e al personale tecnico. Vorrei anche ringraziare i colleghi dell'Ambasciata di Svizzera in Italia e un ringraziamento particolare va a Aurora Lupi, la nostra stagista universitaria. Senza di lei non avremmo potuto organizzare questo evento. E infine un caloroso ringraziamento a tutti voi per aver partecipato attivamente a questa discussione. Buona serata.